is a network that brings together members of parliament that sit on committees of health in our various parliaments. This is very important, and I must begin first of all by commending my colleagues, the pioneers who initiated Niapako, which is a platform of health committees in African parliaments. As health committees, definitely our agenda is the same, to offer oversight and also basically to check the government administration with regard to the health sector.
First and foremost, I would like to start by acknowledging that it's so important for us that we have been able to come here as Faith to Action Network, but also with our partners who are implementing the SHARP program.
Basically, we were looking at sexual and reproductive health, commodities and rights. We have carried on with this work in the SHARP project with another angle of the emphasis, and that is adolescent sexual and reproductive health rights.
I believe that since we are doing policy advocacy, being able to sit in the meeting of members of parliament across Africa who sit in the health committees, that is the biggest, the top level, the most top level target audience.
It's important for faith leaders, or this is to say the interfaith, to be part of this, because we know the influence that they have, and the concerns that are there when it comes to sexual reproductive health issues.
It is very important that as we have our dialogues with our executives, our Ministry of Health and so on, that we must obviously dialogue to promote health by prioritizing sexual and reproductive health and rights.
We are hearing what other actors in the same arena are saying in terms of progress, in terms of gaps, in terms of recommendations.
Whenever the subject of sexuality, as it relates to adolescents and young children, is concerned in the African context, it becomes a very sensitive issue.
So I think there are about two natural issues that occur to young people. The first is their sexuality issue, which changes that come because you're in an adolescent age period. And the second is their education. That's the age of formation. So for us, this meeting speaks to what is a naturally occurring challenge among young people, which they don't choose, they just have to go through.
Another issue is the age of consent for marriage, for sexual activity. The other issue that is also coming across is basically the protection that the state must provide towards young adolescents, basically, because in some cultures and countries, cultural norms take precedence somehow, and you've got to make sure that the state is protecting these young people from getting into early marriages and all that.
One of the biggest issues that came up in sub-Saharan Africa with the COVID pandemic was the level of teenage pregnancies when girls went home. That issue directly affected the young people, but it is a direct issue of SRHR needs and also knowledge present. So as a regional youth forum, the issues of sexual reproductive health and rights are issues of central nature to young people. And if we are to be relevant to that population of young people, we need to be in the spaces where those conversations happen, where commitments take place.
And for religious leaders to be here, it simply means that at least they participate in enactment of these laws, in when it comes to the review of some of these laws, and generally, at least when they work together, at least they'll be able to be in a position where they understand where all this is coming from, and what is required, and the laws that should be made.
The chiefs, the traditional leaders, are quite strong, and they command a lot of influence among their communities and the people they lead. the religious leaders or the faith leaders, the pastors, the bishops are the voice of the majority in their communities. And I think they shape the perspective of community in terms of perceptions about different subjects vis-a-vis adolescent sexual and reproductive health.
We should ensure that the laws that we have are also in line with our own, values.
There needs to be more institutionalized participation of young people so that we can have a path of accountability on the decisions that are taken and be able to speak to commitments by institutions of governance in our region to be able to meet those commitments and bring them to book, but also realize them on ground.
It is very important that this kind of advocacy that we are equipped to do at regional level, we do also a transfer of skills by capacity building, the people who are working at national level and local level, so that they can be a direct link between processes.
We must compel members of parliament to see need, to see reason in the ideas that are in such declarations. Then young people, the big young population of Africa, can benefit from that.
It is very important that once in a while we sit down together, all of us, to share, to compare notes, to learn from each other, to get the best practices, and also to see generally from among ourselves where the gaps are, because we believe that, knowledge is not a preserve of one person or one entity. If we all sit in our respective comfort zones, we may run the risk of being left behind in one other aspect.
This regional advocacy is very important. It's not only for us to make a point, but it's also for us to get intelligence and know how do we occupy the space, how do we collaborate, how do we move the agenda forward.